The celestial spire hung silently above a distant star, its vast structure shimmering with light that reflected off the countless ships gathered around it. The Galactic Council had never seen anything like it. Delegates from hundreds of species filled the grand chamber, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some were enormous, towering above the tallest human, their limbs long and covered in glimmering scales. Others were small, almost invisible to the eye, floating in the air as if they had no weight. Every one of them believed themselves to be part of the greatest civilization in the galaxy. And then, the humans arrived. The human fleet was modest, almost unassuming. Ships with smooth curved lines and simple functional designs approached the spire. They did not glow with energy or carry visible weapons. They moved with quiet confidence, precise and controlled. Some delegates whispered, barely hiding their amusement. "Are these the humans?" One said, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "They look ordinary." The human ships docked with calm efficiency. The humans disembarked in small groups wearing simple uniforms that were practical rather than ornate. No one made a grand entrance. No one demanded attention. And yet, the moment they stepped into the chamber, every eye turned to them. There was something in their presence that felt different. The Galactic Council had prepared carefully for this moment. Every species assumed humans would be timid, fearful, or easily persuaded. After all, humans had not been the first to explore the stars, nor the first to conquer distant worlds. But they had something that could not be measured in technology or size. They had confidence. Not arrogance, but quiet certainty. The lead human ambassador, a woman named Captain Alara Dune, stepped forward. She was of average height with short brown hair and clear, intelligent eyes. She spoke calmly, her voice steady and measured. "Delegates of the Galactic Council," she said, "we are honored to meet you. We come with the desire to understand, to cooperate, and to find solutions that benefit all." Her words were polite, but there was no hesitation, no bending to the will of the Council. The delegates shifted uncomfortably. Many had expected flattery, perhaps fear. What they saw instead was resolve. The negotiations began with standard topics: trade routes, territorial claims, and resource management. Delegates spoke in long, complicated sentences, using terms and calculations meant to overwhelm the humans. Some even tried subtle threats, implying that resistance could have consequences. But the humans listened. They asked questions that were simple, direct, and honest. "If you take this territory, what will happen to the local population?" asked Captain Dune. "Have you considered the long-term effects of controlling this resource?" Her words were not aggressive, but they carried weight. Slowly, she exposed gaps and contradictions in the Council's plans. The galactic delegates exchanged glances. Some whispered to each other, their voices trembling slightly. "They're analyzing us," said one. Another shook his head. "They are asking questions no one has ever considered." Hours passed, and the tension in the chamber grew. Delegates who had thought themselves masters of negotiation began to feel something unfamiliar: doubt. The humans were not intimidated by their technology, their fleets, or their authority. Instead, they met every demand with reason, and every threat with calm questions. At one point, a representative of the Xylar species, a massive being covered in crystalline armor, leaned forward. His voice boomed through the chamber. "You do not realize the power you face. The Galactic Council is vast. You cannot resist us. Why do you waste our time?" Captain Dune met his gaze steadily. "We are not here to waste time. We are here to ensure fairness and to protect the lives of those affected by your decisions. Power is meaningless without responsibility." A quiet murmur ran through the chamber. The Xylar delegate's eyes narrowed. He was not used to being challenged in this way. Many delegates were feeling the same unease that had crept into the Xylar's words. The Council attempted to push harder, offering rewards, promising advantages, even warning of sanctions. But the humans remained calm. They considered every proposal carefully and responded with honesty, without fear or flattery. And then, after what felt like an eternity to the delegates, Captain Dune did something no one expected. She stood. Slowly, deliberately, she walked away from the negotiating table. The room went silent. Her crew followed, not in haste, but in orderly precision. One delegate whispered to another, disbelief in his voice. They left?" "Yes," another replied, eyes wide. They are refusing to negotiate on your terms. The council members were stunned. No species had ever done this. No one had ever walked away without begging, bargaining, or showing some sign of submission. The humans had left calmly, without anger or fear, but with absolute clarity. They would not be pressured, deceived, or controlled. Outside the chamber, the humans returned to their ships. Captain Dune looked at her crew and spoke softly yet firmly. "We will not compromise our values. They must understand that the galaxy is not ours to take. It belongs to all who live in it, and we will protect it responsibly." The galactic delegates still inside the chamber began to murmur among themselves. Some were angry, some confused, and some for the first time were afraid. They had underestimated humans. They had assumed size, technology, and intimidation would be enough. But humans measured strength differently. Courage, integrity, and intelligence. These were the tools of their power. As the human ships departed the spire, the delegates finally understood something crucial. They had made a mistake. The humans were not ordinary. They were resilient, clever, and unyielding. And walking away from the negotiating table was only the first signal that the galaxy had underestimated a force far greater than anyone had imagined. And far away, in the blackness of space, the human fleet moved with purpose. They were observing, learning, and preparing, not for war, but to show the galaxy that underestimating humans was a mistake that no one would ever forget. The moment the humans left the negotiating table, the atmosphere inside the celestial spire shifted. What had begun as confusion soon became a ripple of tension that spread across the galaxy. Delegates who had once believed themselves untouchable now whispered anxiously to one another. For centuries, the Galactic Council had controlled the fate of countless worlds, but humans had shown them something unexpected: the strength to say no. Back on their ships, Captain Alara Dune and her crew gathered in the command room. The room was quiet, filled with soft lights and the hum of the engines. Alara looked at her team, each member attentive and focused. "We did what we had to do," she said, her voice calm. "We showed them that humans cannot be pushed into agreements that harm others or ourselves. Now it is time to observe and prepare." The human fleet spread out into the nearby star systems. They did not act aggressively. They did not declare war or send threats. Instead, they watched, learned, and quietly strengthened their positions. Humans had a way of turning observation into knowledge and knowledge into action. Every planet they passed, every encounter with another species was carefully noted. Every decision, every move was guided by intelligence and foresight. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council struggled to respond. They sent emissaries to contact the humans, offering incentives, gifts, and even veiled warnings. But the humans answered only with reasoned arguments and calm explanations. "We do not seek conflict," Captain Dune wrote in one message. "We seek fairness, cooperation, and respect. Any agreement must protect life, freedom, and knowledge. Anything less is unacceptable." Reports of the humans' calm refusal spread quickly. Across the galaxy, species that had long respected the Council began to whisper about the humans. Traders, explorers, and diplomats carried stories of a species that refused to bow to pressure, that asked questions no one else had thought to ask, and that acted with a clarity and purpose unmatched by any other civilization. Some species tried to dismiss the humans. "They are small, insignificant," said one trader from the Myran system. "They cannot hope to compete with the Council's power." But as days turned into weeks, more reports arrived. Humans had begun quietly settling in star systems previously considered too difficult, forming alliances with neutral species, and negotiating agreements that benefited everyone involved. They were expanding not by force but by intelligence, cooperation, and adaptability. Inside the council chambers, the atmosphere grew tense. The delegates were no longer just frustrated, they were worried. Analysts ran endless simulations. Strategists debated furiously. "They are unpredictable," one counselor said, her voice tight with anxiety. "Every model we run shows that humans behave in ways no one anticipates. They are changing the balance of power without firing a single weapon." Others were less cautious. The Xylar representative, whose crystalline armor reflected the council's lights, slammed his hand against the table. "We cannot allow them to grow unchecked. They are not respecting our authority. They must be controlled." "But how?" another counselor asked, her voice trembling. "Every attempt to intimidate them fails. They are patient. They are clever. And they do not act in fear or anger. That That is something we cannot predict. The humans, however, did not waste time on threats or fear. They focused on action and cooperation. On one planet, they helped a species rebuild after a natural disaster, introducing technology that improved lives without taking control. On another, they mediated a long-standing dispute between two civilizations, finding solutions that no one else had thought possible. With each success, their reputation grew. News of human ingenuity reached even the most distant corners of the galaxy. Explorers and traders marveled at stories of humans solving problems that had resisted solutions for centuries. Word spread. Humans were not only independent, but they were effective, creative, and fair. They could handle challenges that other species could not. They were proving in every quiet action that the Council had underestimated them. Some counselors began to realize the truth. We treated them as weak because we measured strength by size, firepower, and numbers, one whispered to a colleague. But humans measure strength differently. Their power lies in intelligence, courage, and their unwillingness to compromise their principles. Others, however, were slow to understand. They still believed that threats or coercion would force the humans to obey. They tried sending spies and agents hoping to find a weakness. But humans were careful. They did not hide, but they were wise in their dealings. Every interaction was deliberate, every decision informed by careful thought. And every time the Council attempted to manipulate them, the humans responded with logic, fairness, and quiet resolve. Weeks turned into months, and the Council's frustration grew. Their attempts to regain control failed repeatedly. The humans continued their work, settling new systems, assisting civilizations, and forming partnerships without seeking glory or conquest. Every small action was a lesson. Humans acted with purpose, foresight, and integrity. Finally, some counselors began to admit what they had feared for so long. The humans were not merely another species. They were different in ways that challenged centuries of assumptions. Their refusal to negotiate under unfair terms, their patience, their cleverness, and their moral resolve made them a force that the Council could not ignore. Even among the traders and explorers, the lesson became clear. Underestimating humans was a mistake. Small, seemingly ordinary, and modest as they appeared, humans could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast species that had ruled the galaxy for generations. Captain Dune, observing the galaxy from her flagship, remained calm. "They are learning," she said to her first officer, a tall human named Jaren. "We are not here to dominate. We are here to show that fairness, intelligence, and cooperation can succeed where force fails. That is how humans influence the galaxy." Jaren nodded. "And they are listening, even if they do not realize it yet." Indeed, the ripple effects of humans leaving the negotiating table continued to spread. Entire sectors began to reconsider their loyalty to the Council. Merchants hesitated to support oppressive policies. Scientists and scholars studied human methods of problem-solving. Even young explorers, still learning the ways of the galaxy, looked to humans as examples of courage, ingenuity, and moral strength. The Galactic Council, meanwhile, could do nothing but watch and worry. Their authority was no longer unquestioned. Their predictions were failing. Their power, once absolute, seemed less certain in the face of humans who did not act like any species they had known. The humans had done more than leave a table. They had shifted the balance of perception in the galaxy. They had reminded everyone that strength was not measured in fleets, weapons, or fear, but in ideas, values, and resolve. And somewhere, deep in space, Captain Dune smiled as she looked at the stars. She knew the galaxy was beginning to understand the first lesson. Humans could not be controlled, underestimated, or ignored. The Council's mistake had only just begun to reveal itself, and the humans were ready to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. Months had passed since the humans left the negotiating table at the Celestial Spire, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one had predicted. Stories of human ingenuity, fairness, and courage spread like starlight across the spiral arms of countless galaxies. Ships traveling from system to system carried tales of humans solving problems that had stumped generations, of new colonies thriving in places considered impossible, and of humans building alliances without force, without intimidation, and without arrogance. Inside the chambers of the Galactic Council, the atmosphere was tense. Delegates whispered in corners, their voices heavy with worry. What had seemed like a minor inconvenience months ago had grown into something far more significant. Humans were no longer just participants in galactic politics, they were influencers, leaders, and problem solvers. And the Council had failed to recognize them until it was almost too late. The Xylar representative slammed his crystalline fists against the table. "We cannot allow this to continue," he roared. "The humans have grown too strong in influence. They act in ways we cannot predict. They have no weapons, yet their power spreads faster than our fleets." A younger delegate, representing the floating Solari species, spoke softly. "They do not need weapons to succeed. Their strength lies in their actions, their courage, and the way they inspire others. They are teaching the galaxy that control and fear are not the only paths to power." Across the Council, a silent realization settled over many delegates. For centuries, power had been measured in fleets and armies, in the ability to dominate others. But humans measured power differently. They measured it in ingenuity, cooperation, and moral strength. They measured it in courage and the willingness to stand firm even when threatened. And the Council had assumed incorrectly that humans would be like all other species, easily swayed, easily intimidated. Far from the Council, Captain Alara Dune and her crew watched the stars. "They are beginning to understand," she said quietly. Her crew, experienced and disciplined, nodded in agreement. "The galaxy thinks strength comes from weapons, armies, and fleets," she continued. "But humans have shown a different kind of strength, and the Council will see it for themselves." Humans were now working across multiple sectors. On one planet, they helped a species of amphibious beings repair their water systems after a catastrophic flood. On another, they mediated a long-standing conflict between two trading factions, creating a solution that benefited both sides. They did not seek recognition, nor did they boast of their accomplishments. Their influence spread quietly but effectively, demonstrating the power of action over words and cooperation over domination. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council attempted to regain control. They sent emissaries, offered rewards, and even hinted at sanctions. Yet every attempt failed. Humans responded with reason, logic, and patience. They never lashed out. They never begged for acceptance. They simply acted in ways that made others see their wisdom and fairness. Slowly, sectors that had once been loyal to the Council began to shift their loyalties, not through fear, but through respect and admiration. A meeting was finally called at the Celestial Spire. This time, the Council gathered not to negotiate, but to assess the situation. Delegates arrived, whispering urgently. Analysts and spies had compiled reports detailing human settlements, alliances, and projects. The numbers were staggering. Humans had achieved in months what the Council had thought would take decades, without using force, intimidation, or deceit. The debate was intense. "We cannot control them," one elder counselor said, his voice shaking. "They act too unpredictably. Every time we try to intervene, they respond in ways we cannot anticipate. They are not just clever, they are extraordinary." Another delegate, representing the scholarly Oran species, nodded. "It is not just intelligence. It is their courage, their patience, and their integrity. They have shown us that power does not only come from domination. Their refusal to sign our initial agreements was not defiance. It was a demonstration of principles, and the galaxy has responded." Even the most proud and arrogant delegates began to understand the truth. Humans were not ordinary. They were resilient. They were clever. They were capable of extraordinary feats without violence. Walking away from the negotiating table had been more than a refusal. It had been a message that humans would not compromise their values, and that the galaxy could not ignore them. In the middle of the chamber, holographic screens displayed recent human achievements. Colonies on barren planets were thriving. Trade agreements between species were flourishing. Conflicts were resolved without war. Everywhere humans acted, life improved and trust grew. The Council had underestimated a force that was not measured by firepower, but by vision, resolve, and courage. Finally, the Council issued a statement. "The humans have demonstrated qualities that are rare even in the galaxy. They act with intelligence, fairness, and strength of character. We acknowledge their independence and their right to make decisions that affect their people and others. They have shown us that the measures of strength we have long relied on are not the only path to influence." The room was silent after the announcement. Some delegates bowed, some looked uneasy, and some nodded in respect. No one could deny what the humans had accomplished. The lesson had been hard but undeniable. Humans were exceptional. Far from the council chambers, Captain Dune received the news calmly. She smiled quietly at her crew. "They understand now," she said. "It took time, but the galaxy has finally seen what humans can do. Not through fear, not through force, but through courage, intelligence, and integrity." Her first officer, Jaren, looked out at the stars, and they will never forget it. Every species now knows that humans cannot be underestimated. Across the galaxy, the story of humans leaving the negotiating table became legend. Traders told it in bustling markets, scholars recorded it in histories, and young explorers dreamed of following in their footsteps. Humans had changed the perception of what strength meant. They had reminded the galaxy that courage, fairness, and cleverness could outshine fleets of warships and armies of soldiers. And somewhere, in the quiet of space, the humans continued their work. They did not seek fame, power, or control. They sought understanding, fairness, and cooperation. They had walked away from a table, and in doing so, they had shown the galaxy a truth it could no longer deny. Humans were extraordinary. The Galactic Council had finally understood their mistake. They had assumed humans could be intimidated, controlled, or overlooked. They were wrong. Humans were a force of intelligence, courage, and integrity, qualities that could not be bought, threatened, or ignored. The galaxy had learned, as the humans had known all along, that underestimating humanity was the greatest mistake it could ever make. And as Captain Dune's fleet moved steadily through the stars, she knew the lesson would continue to resonate. Strength was not just power, but purpose, and the humans had purpose in abundance.